and welcome to the early service. You guys are kind of packed in there today, huh? Yeah, it's kind of, you know how cold it is up north by how crowded the early service is. And we are glad, we thank God all the time for our friends from the north and what they bring to our culture and to our church. And such a blessing to have vacationers and visitors, and I was told I can't use the word snowbirds. So winter guests, I think, is what I was told to say. But we are glad that you're here today. We have been in a series of messages walking through Joshua and looking to derive principle from history, right? To look at the history of how God brought the nation of Israel into the promised land, and then to gather from that how God behaves, how God acts with his people, and then to apply that to our lives of how we are God's people today and how we are to know our God, how we are to grow in our relationship with God, making all the adjustments we need to make, and then to show that good theology, good love to the rest of the world. And so we find ourselves today in a very similar passage to the last few weeks as we've been watching as God divvies up the land to each individual tribe. And I want to talk today about the fairness of God. Fairness is a big issue in our culture today, so I will try to speak to that without speaking about that. But we're hung up on the idea of equality and equity and fairness, and we desire, I think, at least as much as we can within our own scope, to be fair and to be just and to treat everybody the same. But due to our fallen nature and our inadequacies and our lack of understanding, a lot of times we don't treat people with equity and equality and fairness and all of that. But that doesn't mean that we should not strive for such ideals, right? That we strive for those things. But in the scope of it, we also see principles that would teach us that there's something better to be sought than just equity and equality. When I was growing up, the rule in our house is if there was something to be shared, such as a piece of pie, one of my sister or myself, one of us would cut the pie, and the other would choose, right? Thereby ensuring the best attempt at fairness. And sometimes, though, when we get to life, life's not fair. That's the hypocrisy of my mom. She would tell us to be fair and to share it right down the middle, and then also she would say, well, life's not fair. I think that's the quote that I'm going to carry with me into the future from my mom, and I can't say this in the second service because she'll be watching. And I can see your faces light up as you're texting her right now. Life's not fair. And it doesn't matter where you're at. From your perspective, you probably are experiencing a life that is not fair. In your perspective, right? It's like if life was fair, I would drive this kind of car. Or if life was fair, I would not be having this kind of surgery. Or if life was fair, I would not be financially struggling. And our ability to evaluate our own circumstances is laughable at most. Right, we think that life's not fair compared to everybody else in the world, and we don't think about the people who lived here, 200 years ago. Right, because there were people who lived in Florida 200 years ago, and I visited that fort in St. Augustine, and I've seen the beds that they slept on, the one bed that they all slept on. You come. This is not in my notes. You come into Forte de Matanza, and you come in, you go. If you make a quick right and another right, you end up in the quarters. And they slept at an angle like this because of tuberculosis. Side by side by side by side by side on straw and wood. And then we're like, life's not fair. My bed doesn't adjust like that, right? But it just seems like and the sin within us is this discontent with where God has given us. And we've been looking at that throughout the tribes of Israel as God's divvying up. He's giving certain lands to certain tribes. 2 weeks ago, it was Hebron was given to the tribe that could handle the mountain battles, right? Go fight, conquer the mountains. And then Judah was given the central part of Israel where Jerusalem, the king would reign. And God is not fair. God is just. And God is strategic. And so if we can set aside our desire for fairness and understand that God has a greater purpose and a greater plan for a greater good, then I think we'll be better off today. Let's set aside equality and equity and fairness in exchange for submission to God's will. If we can do that, we will have had a Sunday. Right? If you'll stand with me in honor of God's word, we're going to be in Joshua chapter 17 today. Verse 1 says, "There was also a lot for the tribe of Manasseh, for he was the firstborn of Joseph, namely for Machir, the firstborn of Manasseh, the father of Gilead, because he was a man of war. Therefore, he was given Gilead and Bashan. And there was a lot for the rest of the children of Manasseh, according to their families. For the families of Abiezer, the children of Helek, the children of Asriel, the children of Shechem, the children of Hefer, the children of Shemida. These were male children of Manasseh, the son of Joseph, according to their families. But Zelophehad, the son of Hefer, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, had no sons but only daughters. And these are the names of his daughters: Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tisra. And they came near before Eleazar, the priest, before Joshua, the son of Nun, and before the rulers, saying, "The Lord commanded Moses to give us an inheritance among our brothers. Therefore, according to the commandment of the Lord, he gave them an inheritance among their father's brother." You may be seated. We see here the provision of promise that God had made promises to Abraham. God had made promises to Moses and to the descendants in the nation of Israel. And everybody kind of got their piece. Everybody got their allotment. Everybody got their land that they were going to be responsible to occupy, to farm, to provide for their tribe. And I'm reminded of that game Monopoly. You ever start Monopoly and you do it the fast way, where the banker kind of divvies up all the properties, and they're giving this out, and it's you just hope that you get a good deal in the, you end up with Boardwalk and not, I don't know, Baltic. And so as God is handing out by tribe, they are given certain things according to their to God's provision of promise, right? That God had provided for them. He had promised them the nation of Israel. You will have the promised land. But he didn't make specific promises about what part of the land you get, and he didn't make promises about how much of the land you get. He just said, I'm going to give you a place, and that's going to be your place. And yet there are things that happen here that throw us a little bit out of equity and equality and fairness, such as that Machir, the firstborn of Manasseh, the father of Gilead, got a larger portion because he was a man of war. And you can kind of do the math in your head. Okay, well, he worked harder for it, or maybe because he was a man of war, he could maybe lead troops to kind of conquer better. you can kind of do some math there and maybe make that work in your head. But you're like, okay, well, there's a little bit of inequity there. It's not fair. And then you have also the rule of the firstborn coming into play here. And we don't really live according to this anymore. But in ancient times and in other times, the firstborn got half the inheritance, if not more. And the rest of us, I'm a secondborn. Firstborn male, though, so I would have gotten that. And you're like, well, fairness is out the window, right? And if I go any further into this conversation, I am, I'm going to go into that conversation. And there's something better than fairness. Fairness would be you take your 12 children and you take your acre of land or 2 acres of farmland or 3 acres or 5 acres or 10 acres enough, and you divide it 12 ways, and you have pushed every one of your children into poverty. Right? And so it was very common in that day to say, you know what, this is the homestead. This is the family land, and it's going to be the majority of the inheritance goes to the firstborn so that they can stay within the family. And that older brother had a responsibility to employ, to care for, to house his siblings. Right? It was the responsibility was handed down from the father to the firstborn son. The eldest son, because you could be an older man with a very young child, as was very common in the day because of mortality, because of lack of means of, keeping yourself from having more children. Those things happen, right? Your spouse passes away, you marry a new spouse, you have more kids. We see it all throughout Scripture. And what you did not want to do is you did not want to dissolve in such a way that by fairness and equity, you dissolved your whole family. You push them all to the poorhouse. You push them all back to stage one, and they had to begin again. If you had any amount of means, you would kind of keep that going. And we look at that today, and we're like, well, that's just, well, they looked at it, and they're like, that's pragmatic. And we can discount it. We can say it's unfair. But God had a purpose and a plan, and so the firstborn did receive more inheritance. And so we are confronted with that reality in this passage. It's like, well, is God fair? Is it fair that so-and-so is more athletic than I am, or so-and-so is smarter than I am, or so-and-so is taller than I am, or all of you have more hair than I do? I mean, I had one bald friend in the first service, and he started growing his hair out. Come on, man. So God does things not necessarily by fairness, but God does things by design. And so I think one of the things you need to know is that when the inheritance was allotted, it wasn't done like, okay, well, I'm going to slice the land in half or in twelfths, and you're going to get, each of you is going to get 1/12 of the promised land. It was done on purpose, and God has a purpose for not making you more athletic, or not making you taller, or not making you smarter. God has a purpose and a plan for what He gave to you. And it's not fair. Life's not fair. And if you're seeking fairness, then we're all net zero, right? We're all par. Everybody's par. There's no greatness. And so God made great, and God made lesser, and God gave some to be great in one area and lesser in another area. God gave some to be extraordinarily great, and so we can have something to aspire to, or someone that can lead us into greater things, and that we would never even have imagined had it not been for these great people. And so we look at that, and God has a purpose for the allotted inheritance. Secondly, I love this fact that what we also see here is that God made it an accommodation. Right? That all of a sudden you got somewhere along the line, you get a girl dad. Any girl dads in the house? Just girls? Yeah. Josh, you're a girl dad too? Yeah. How about those girl dads, right? Here you have a guy whose name I can't pronounce, Zelophehad, and he just has daughters. And what does God do there? When the lots are cast, God keeps his promise to them because he's not going to break his promise, right? Whatever may come as a result, God stays true to his promise. And an exception and an accommodation is not a violation of the promise. What it is that God goes above and beyond his promise to also give them out of, here's our word, grace, something more than was normal in that day or expected in that day, but something God had already agreed to. And I love that we have an accommodating God. Because if we did not have an accommodating God, none of us will be in heaven. It's by grace you are saved. That grace is the accommodation God made for your sinfulness. And so, yes, there are, in the reality of the scope of the world, there are girl dads. And there are not firstborn sons. And there are not sons. And so what happened here is that God kept his promise, but he expanded his promise to accommodate these girls by grace and gave them, according to the promise, gave them more. That God's promises are not rigid, right? They're not limited formulas. They are not, derived by scarcity. Keep that word in mind, scarcity. Right? That God's like, oh, well, if I give that, then I can't give that to some boys because I like boys better. God is able to expand his grace without diminishing his holiness, without diminishing his truth and his promise. So these girls are not overlooked in the allotment of the provision of the promise. They're given according to what God had promised to their ancestors just as well. And so while we see this taking place, God gives room. Now, I want to drill in to the next couple of verses, but I'm afraid you're not going to pay attention. So I wrote with a highlighter over my Bible verses here, I wrote, pay attention. Because this is the crux of where we're working today. This is the nuance, this is the angle, this is the diamond in the rough that I think if you're just reading your Bible for entertainment's sake, you won't pay attention to this. But I think this is where the rubber meets the road. And I want you to listen for the next couple of minutes, and then you can go back to planning your day. Verse 5 says, 10 shares fell to Manasseh beside the land of Gilead, Bashan, which were on the other side of Jordan, because the daughters of Manasseh received an inheritance among his sons. And the rest of Manasseh's sons had the land of Gilead, and the territory of Manasseh was from Asher to Michmath, that lies east, and had the land of Tappuah. But Tappuah on the border of Manasseh belonged to the children of Ephraim, and the borders descended to the brook Canaan, or Cana, southward to the brook. These cities of Ephraim are among the cities of Manasseh. The border of Manasseh was on the north side of the brook. It ended by the sea. Southward was Ephraim's, north it was Manasseh's, and the sea was its border. Manasseh's territory was adjoining Asher, north of the sea of Issachar, and Issachar and Asher. Manasseh had Beth Shan and its towns, Ibleam and its towns, the inhabitants of Dor and its towns, the inhabitants of Endor and its towns, the inhabitants of Taanach and its towns, the inhabitants of Megiddo and its towns, 3 hilly regions. Yet the children of Manasseh could not drive out the inhabitants of those cities, but the Canaanites were determined to dwell in that land. And it happened when the children of Israel grew strong that they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not utterly drive them out. Verse 14. Then the children of Joseph spoke to Joshua, saying, why have you given us only one lot among the share to inherit it? Since we are a great people, inasmuch as the Lord has blessed us until now. So Joshua answered them, if you are a great people, Then go up to the forest country and clear a place for yourself, there in the land of the Perizzites and the giants, since the mountains of Ephraim are too closely confined for you. But the children of Joseph said, the mountain country is not enough, and all the Canaanites who dwell in the land of the valley have chariots of iron, both those who are of Bethshan and its towns and those who are of the valley of Jezreel. And Joshua spoke to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim, to Manasseh, saying, you are a great people and have great power. You shall not only have one lot, but the mountain country shall be yours. Although it is wooded, you shall cut it down, and its farthest extent shall be yours, for you shall drive out the Canaanites, though they have iron chariots and are strong. So we see God now addressing their complaint. Their complaint is, well, we're too great a people to settle for such a small portion, right? We are so big and we are so important and we are so blessed that we should get a bigger section of land. And now you're confining us, and we don't need to go into all the confines, but the confines are like between the river and the hill and the mountain and all this, and they're kind of getting hemmed in. And not only that, they've got to deal with Bethshan. Now, when we were in Israel, we went to Bethshan. Bethshan is the most amazing city. It's probably one of the greatest archaeological sites. The amount of detail of how much was there resource-wise, how much strength was there, how much power was there, is still seen today, thousands and thousands and thousands of years later. And so we know that was a wonderful place, but it was a difficult place. But what do the people do? They get their allotment, and what do they immediately do? They complain that God had not given them enough. Isn't that us? We have this scarcity mindset that if somebody else has something, that all of a sudden now we have been shortchanged. Right? I think you missed how wonderful we are. You missed how great, how numerous, how powerful we are. There's this story called Avengers Endgame. Now, I don't expect you to know this, but there's this dude in Avengers Endgame who, I don't know, he does this thing. Right? And if you've seen this movie, it's a Marvel movie. I'm not a Marvel fan. I'm not a DC fan either. I really don't like movies that much. But Thanos has a solution to the overpopulation of the world. It's the plot hole of the whole movie, right? And all the Avengers, all the Spider-Man and Captain America, and all of them are fighting against Thanos to try to keep him from, and with one snap of the finger, Thanos fairly and indiscriminately snaps his finger, and half of the universe population disappears. He solved their problem. Right? Their problem is there's not enough resources in the universe, and those stinking Americans, and all the we've been killing the environment, and we've been stealing all the energy from the universe, and his solution is to snap his fingers and make it all go away. And I will tell you that there is a mindset among us that a lot of us would say, you know what? If that's what it takes, that's fair. He didn't discriminate. He didn't say, well, these people are more worthy because they're people of war, or these people have a greater number, so they deserve a bigger piece. He didn't make any judgment calls. He just made one, and that was to say, you know what? Let's just lessen the load. That is our culture, and that is our world. What Thanos could have done, if he had the power, there you go. I know you're worried about shaking my hand, but this is my left hand, so. If Thanos had the power to eliminate half of the universe's population, couldn't he not, on the other hand, doubled the resources? Plot hole. This is why I don't watch movies, because it drives me nuts. Like, wait a minute. What you're saying is that he can destroy half the universe, but he can't create more resources in the universe. I mean, is that not also possible? Can we go where no man has gone before? Seek out new life and new civilization. Right? Can't you're going to get on to me for... Listen, here's the plot hole, is that scarcity mindset combined with an idyllic, false sense of fairness destroys. It removes. They're like, well, we want a bigger piece of the pie. And God says, okay, you want a bigger piece of the pie? Go cut down those mountains, fight those battles, and you can have it. It's called God's provision, right? It's the provision of his promise, that there is always more to be had if you will go and you will work for it. We have to reject this communist ideal of fairness that brings everybody down to the same level. To say, you know what? We got to split this pie 12 ways. We've got to take this pizza and we got to slice it and slice it and slice it until everybody starves to death. Right? And why not go to the kitchen and make another pizza? Right? The ingredients are there to be had. And if they're not, grow some oregano in your herb garden. The reality is that if we accept the world's philosophy, we will live with a scarcity mindset rather than a faith in a God who promises and provides. And the way that God provided for these ingrates is to say, listen, go cut down more land. You want more land? There's the forest. Go cut down the trees and plant crops. Well, I don't know. They have iron chariots. What does he say? You shall drive out the Canaanites, even though they have iron chariots and are strong. So God addresses their complaints. God's abundant sufficiency is that there is more to be had. And I don't know what scarcity you're dealing with today. If you are dumb, you know what? There's more to be had. You can go. My dad failed the third grade. I believe that drove him the rest of his life. He was a student the rest of his life. Like, he had stacks of books on the coffee table every morning. And all he did was study. Why? Because there's more to be had. Right? If you're not strong enough, guess what? There's a gymnasium down the road. There are people there that would love to train you. Right? Right? Yes. They would love to help you shed a few pounds, gain some muscle, exercise that crazy elbow thing you got going on there. There's more to be had, and yet if we're not careful, we will fall into a scarcity mindset. Woe is me. And we will turn inward, and we will not live the life that God has for us to go into promise and his provision. His provision is there. There is more. He came to give us life, and life more what? Abundantly, right? So there's more abundance to be enjoyed. Now, that's not prosperity preaching. That's hard work. Because if you want to have more, you're going to have to do some things, and that's where the pursuit comes in. We've got to pursue that promise. So how do we deal with this in our own lives? How do we enact this change of mindset to say, you know what, God does have more for me. How can I now go and pursue that more? How can I go and reach further? How can I take the promise, the principle of the promise, the principle of the provision of God, and put that into taking hold of the possession that God would have for me? So first of all, we've got to confront the compromise. Right? We've got to confront the compromise. We cannot continue to live in this mindset where we just, oh, woe is me. I wish I was taller. I wish I was smarter. I wish I was stronger. I wish I was better looking. I wish I had all my teeth. Verse 12 and 13 show us that Manasseh compromised by putting the Canaanites to tribute rather than driving them out. We talked about that a little bit last week. Right? They put them to tax, put them to work. Verse 12 says, yet the tribe of Manasseh, here's our key word we talked about last week, could not drive out the inhabitants of those cities. We looked at that with whatever tribe we looked at last week. I can't remember the name of it. Ephraim, was it Ephraim last week? They did not, right? So they could not drive them out. But the Canaanites were determined to dwell in that land. And it happened when the children of Israel grew strong that they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not drive them out. Here's our problem. We have this limited ability at one stage of our life, and we carry that with us throughout life, and it causes us to compromise. So with Ephraim last week, I think it was Ephraim, they did not drive out the inhabitants of the land. They made a choice. Others could not. Judah could not. In chapter, 16, 15? 15, Judah could not. Ephraim could, but did not in chapter 16. And now we have a third example, and it's a could not and then did not. And I don't know how many of you are could nots and therefore did nots. But Manasseh was a could not, could, did not. That there was something lacking in their strength in the early days. There's an old preacher illustration. I don't even know if it's true or not, but it came to mind about an elephant being trained to a rope and a stake. That when an elephant is a baby, a little elephant, they stake it to the ground with a fiber rope. And that little elephant just can't pull against that stake, and it can't get free. But as the elephant gets older, it's learned helplessness, right? It thinks it can't because it knows that it can't. Because when it was, I don't know how much an elephant weighs when it's born, but when it's a baby, it couldn't. And so now that it's this multi-ton massive beast, it could easily pull that stake out, but doesn't. Because it doesn't think it can, because it couldn't when it couldn't. And now that it can, it still thinks it can't, so it doesn't. Does that click? If you followed my logic. So there was a time when Manasseh could not drive out the Canaanites. The Canaanites were determined to stay. And they're like, well, they're too strong for us. They're too powerful for us. We can't do it. But as Manasseh grew as a people, and then they finally had the capabilities of driving them out, rather than driving them out, they took advantage of them and enslaved them. That's evil. Right? They should have said, okay, time for you to go. Time for you to move out. God told us to move you out. We should have moved you out to begin with, but you wouldn't go. But now we're bigger than you are, and you will be moving out. But the reality is they did not. Rather, they took advantage of them, they enslaved them, and they compromised. And there's a problem with you and for me when we, in one area of our life, have a limitation. And we carry that limitation into the future. And that what was a weakness is now deliberate sin. Right? It's rebellion. Like, oh, well, I can't do it. No, that's not true. You couldn't do it, but you could do it now. I don't know what area that is for you. I think of time. There's a time when you didn't have time. Right? You were working 60 hours a week. You were raising kids. You were taking them to ball practice, ballerina practice. You were doing all these things. You did not have time, and now you have time. And you just couldn't. Someone say, hey, would you volunteer here? And you're like, sorry, I'm overwhelmed already. I don't have the time. And honestly, you didn't have the time. But now you have the time. It could be finances. There maybe was a time in your life where you could not tithe, you could not give. You couldn't support a missionary. You couldn't give to the church. And by all means, I understand that you were 12. Like you had an allowance, and that if you didn't get your allowance and collect enough, listen, for me, it was collecting glass Coca-Cola bottles on the side of the road. That's my people. Picking up the bottles, turning them in, getting enough to buy a soda at the gas station. That was my life between the ages of, 12 and 14. 14, I got my job at Chick-fil-A, and my life turned around. But just because you couldn't do something then doesn't mean you can't do something now. But we still don't. Right? We're in a habit of not. And so rather than doing what God called us to do, we sin and we compromise and we use it for our own. We exploit people. It was sin for Manasseh to exploit the Canaanites. It's wrong whenever we take advantage of other people. And it's wrong whenever we disobey God. And yet, there's something in our mind that says, well, it's just fair. If I'm going to let them live here, then they need to pay their own way. And they exacted tribute, and they exacted forced labor. If anybody should have known what it was like to be a slave, it was Israel. Right? And here they are committing the same crimes, doing the same wrongs. Second thing that we have to do as we apply this is we've got to begin to cut the clutter. Talking about chopping down trees here. If you want more, then you've got to make room for more. Right? If you want God to do more in your life, then you've got to make room for God to do more in your life. If you want to pray the prayer of Jabez, God, give me more responsibility, then you need to get your chainsaw out and go clear some land, dig up some stumps, plow some fields, clear out the stones, plant some crops, defend those crops, water those crops. If you want more, there's more to be had, but you've got to begin to clear the clutter. Now, my wife and I, we clear the clutter two different ways. My philosophy is a place for everything and everything in its place. Her place is the trash can. Like, I don't know where half of my stuff is. Oh, actually, I do. It's at the dump. Because if I don't keep an eye on her, she throws away perfectly good stuff that I had in high school. And I wish that wasn't true. But there are things that clutter your life. There's forests of things that clutter your life, that stand in the way of the progress that you want, the portion that you want. And these are the numerous, innumerable, things that kind of stack up, overwhelming tasks. For some of us, it may be digging our way out of credit card debt. For some of us, it may be losing weight. It's just the things that take a long time and a lot of effort to clear the clutter so that we can step into that calling of God. If God is wanting to bring us, to take us on a mission trip, but we just don't have the physical capability of going on that, then what's standing in the way of you getting in physical shape to go on that mission trip? The reality is there's a lot of times we just kind of like, yeah, I just can't. I would love to cut down those trees and plant those fields, but the Canaanites have they have iron chariots. And we make all kinds of reasoning, and we just need to cut through the clutter. I had another word for that, but we'll keep it with clutter. Maybe that for you is you're a senior adult and you're physically not where you used to be. And maybe you're never going to get back to, that. Maybe you need to get back to your original weight, but what is 7 pounds, 9 ounces really? Yeah. Maybe you're a single person and you're dealing with loneliness, and it's just not fair that everybody else has somebody and you don't have somebody. the Apostle Paul was single. And you know what he said? I'm glad I'm single. I wish everybody was single. Because he replaced singleness with purpose. Let me rephrase it. He replaced loneliness. He replaced loneliness with purpose. He didn't say, well, you know what, everybody else is married. It's not fair for me to be unmarried. No, he says, okay, God gave me this gift of singleness on purpose. Now I can go and I can do things and I can chase dreams and I can carry the gospel to all these cities because I don't have responsibilities left behind. And he was able to go all in for God. He saw his singleness as not inequity. He saw his singleness through the lens of purpose. So his cure for loneliness was not to find Miss Right. His cure for loneliness was to find, okay, God, what do you want me to do with this? Okay, you made me this way. What do you want me to do? God did not make me 6'5" or I would be a basketball player today. Well, maybe not today. I may be on the courts down the street, but not, you know. But God didn't make me that way, so maybe God didn't have a purpose for me to be that. The reality is like God made you, God gave you, God created you, God surrounded you, God allotted to you on purpose. And it's not fair. But there's more to be had. If you want more, there's more to be had. You just got to go and you cut the clutter and you got to clear some ground and plant some fields and conquer some giants. I mean, that's all it's going to take is conquering a few giants, right? And verse 17, it says, Joshua spoke to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, saying, you are a great people. You have great power. You shall not have only one lot, but the mountain country shall be yours. Although it is wooded, you shall cut it down. And its farthest extent shall be yours, for you shall drive out the Canaanites, though they have iron chariots and are strong. We've got to stop complaining about what God has given us and what God has provided to us, and we've got to go conquer what he has available to us. We've got to step out and go after those giants. God, give us more responsibility. Give us more people who need the gospel. Give us a church full of sinners so that we might sanctify them. I don't know. I don't want sinners in my church. I would rather have a church of sanctified people and everybody's got their act together. It's not this church, I'll tell you that. But here's what we get. Here's what we get. When we, as a bunch of diverse, ethnically, financially, age, if I could go there, wise, what an amazing thing happens when we are the picture of possession. Like we step into that reality as a bunch of, I don't know, followers of God. One of the things you have seen here is you've seen the faithfulness of God, and you've seen the faithfulness of God as it pertains to families. Every family got their portion, every family got their lot, and every family had responsibilities to go and use that for him. And here we sit, I don't know, several thousand years later, discussing it. You have generational stories. Stories like my wife tells of her grandmother who got married at the age of 14 and they lived in their car and were sharecrop orange pickers here in Central Florida. That's a cool story, right? Like, what's your family here? You got a story. You got generational stories in your family of people who overcame. Now, I'm not saying 14-year-olds need to get married. But there was a time. Every one of you has a generational story to tell about faithfulness within your family. I tell you my stories about my family all the time. You're probably sick of them. You're probably like, I've already heard that one. And I'm working on coming up with some new ones. But we're moving into fan fiction at this point. But the reality is, man, if you do this, if you can shift over from equity, equality, fairness to the purpose of God for how he provided for you and how he created you, and you go chase that purpose, then some of you losers will be winners. You'll stop making excuses. You'll go chop down some trees. You will be the ones that your grandkids will talk about who lived in a car and picked oranges and brought their family to Jesus. You will have those generations, and this is amazing. You want your grandkids to talk about you? Then chase some dreams. Do what God has created you to do. Find your purpose. I want to say Arlen Sanders, Kentucky Fried Chicken, he was retired when he made his first batch of chicken. Like, we still look at him today, right? He's iconic. He didn't do that till he was old. Let's go as chase some dreams and get some victorious ventures. Threw that in there because we're planting this venture church. It's exciting. If you're not volunteering over at Venture, then Josh and I would like to talk to you about that. Because Josh was over there last week twice, volunteering over there, right? You can make a difference, not here, but over there. And you can go and you can win some battles on some battlefields that are not even your own, and you can enjoy some blessed boundaries. They had the opportunity. Manasseh had the opportunity to fully embrace the allotment of God for them. Was it going to mean that they had to fight some Canaanites in iron chariots? Yeah, but last time I checked, they're still making movies about defeating Canaanites in iron chariots. Right? Because that's where the joy is found. That's where the victory is found. That's where the stories are told. And when you do that, can you imagine if Manasseh had been obedient? How wonderful, how beautiful that tribe's land would be. A place fully embracing God's call, bountiful blessings because they had expanded into the woodlands, into the hill country. Bet Shan is theirs. The iron chariots are now theirs. The stories are theirs. And more importantly, they had discovered their purpose and why God gave them this promise. Let's pray together. Lord, we love you. We are grateful for the blessings you give us. Lord, we are grateful for the challenges you give us. Lord, help us to get beyond ourselves, beyond this nonsense of fairness. Lord, to realize that you have a purpose. You have a plan. You are strategic. You created the sun bigger than the moon on purpose. Lord, help us to be followers of you and not of this world and its culture and its false religions. Lord, help us. In Jesus' name, amen.